Oh, gods! Could we at least sit down? Seth thought to herself, despairing. They had been training all day, and even with being afforded a decent break before the last few drills, where they would not know what Glera and her crew would try, they were still completely worn out by now. Yet Dakota was seemingly not. Nor was Tom, of course, but that was hardly unusual, and they had both spent much of the day riding with Jarrix after all. They were all gathered around a table in the Grand Hall to discuss how things had gone. The table had been dragged over towards where the hatch up under the roof was located, so Jarrix could also see the table in question. Sapphire's main complaint was the fact that the benches had been left where they were to make room for more people around the table. The keep had been thoroughly trashed during the final exercise, fancy weaponry notwithstanding. Had it been for real, Sav still felt reasonably sure they would have won. Certainly if Glera and her crew didn't know ahead of time what they were in for, like any future hostiles hopefully wouldn't. That sadly did not excuse them for trying to do better. No, Dakota, the strategy was sound, but the execution was lacking, Victoria replied, as they moved the small wooden pieces back to the starting points. You will simply have to train such maneuvers more frequently in the future. If that is the case, then we shouldn't have used it during the final exercise. We should have run through it during the early stages of the day. Perhaps, but there was no time to train for every contingency. In which case, I should not order them to do something which I should be fully aware of them not being able to pull off reliably. Saf saw Essie shrink a little out of the corner of her eye. Dakota would never blame her lifelong friend for what had happened, even if it was Essie who had misunderstood the signal and intercepted Glera's crew head-on rather than going to follow them from behind. It was an honest mistake. Saf still wasn't even sure it counted as a mistake, since it was a perfectly viable tactic in that situation, and one often used. But apparently not in this case, for some reason. I'm fucking happy I'm not the one leading, if you have to know what Dakota is thinking all the time. Next to her, Fengi had been getting a little anxious, or at least as anxious as you could get, while so tired you might be ready to drop dead. Foe sorta had, laying down flat on the floor in protest. The Greenhorns had done well enough. They had certainly kept up, which was hardly surprising for racers, but only Bo seemed to have any real eye for tactics. Perhaps one day she could make a decent formation lead. I won't argue that, Victoria finally relented, clearly reluctant to do so as she leaned back, crossing her arms. Dakota just leaned forward harder, both arms planted on the table, a slight sneer on her face, eyes darting over the pieces. If I ordered a general retreat, they would have flown over to the keep. Glera would get her run nonetheless, but she would be vulnerable to a counter. Indeed, though she would be coming out of a dive, her speed would be quite high, and the Huntresses would only catch her for but a moment. With some of our new weaponry, a moment will do. Firing from above, Sapphire's arrows will not struggle for range. Victoria did not have an easy counter for that one, rubbing her chin slightly, thinking. It may not hit, but if it does, it could put her out of the fight. Sapphire, if you get such a chance, don't waste your time on the head and neck. Too slender of a target, and able to dodge if they see your arrow coming. Between the wing shoulders. Yup. The centre of mass will be harder to move out of the way, Tom agreed. The human likely having picked up on something he actually understood well enough about the day's fighting. Quite, and she's eating dirt if you hit her there, Jarrix joined in enthusiastically. The dragon had been quite pleased with his performance today, even if he too seemed rather worn out. The enthusiastic smile did wash away swiftly, following a scathing look from Victoria, though. And a hit to the chest would still see her gravely wounded, and I need not explain to you what shattering her spine would entail, she continued, the dragon looking away for a moment. Well, she can't use her tail for starters, Balathon added in with a chuckle, tapping the ground with the wood and metal prosthetic attached to his backside. Anchor rolled his eyes at the shitty joke, while Rachuk just shook his head. And with her retreating as a minimum, and perhaps down for good, it will be 2-on-1, Rachuk added, gathering up the remaining 3 pieces. If they run, the Huntresses will harry them all the way out. If they fight, only we would give them melee with the Huntresses picking off stragglers. If they try to engage the Huntresses closely, they will be outrun. Though you must be careful not to let us chase your Huntresses away from the field. We may manage to run while pursuing you if you are not careful. Herded like sheep. Even if pursued, stick with your other formations, Major Jordan grumbled, sliding the 2 blue pieces together. I have seen it done many times before against undisciplined fighters. Not that I think we will find that here, Victoria added, pointedly throwing a look Rachuk's way. The captain had given her a run for her money more than once. He did, of course, have superior numbers and the shotguns on his side, but it was rather hard to agree on just how effective the guns would be before they truly tried to test them out. And, well, that was a day best left waiting. I will try to remember it, Essie spoke up, clearly uncomfortable, keeping her head low. The others hadn't even been looking at her, but they all turned to pay attention. Rachuk nodded sagely. Victoria and Jordan glanced first to each other, then to Dakota, not seeming so sure, while the Gilded Huntress just looked at her old friend's face, worry starting to show on her own. Essie, none of this is your fault. I should have known what you would do. No, you shouldn't. It was a mistake. You shouldn't predict mistakes. I thought you wanted us to do a ragey cut, not a... I don't even remember what it's called, Essie blurted out, clearly distraught. I'm not much of a soldier. On the frontier, we always end up being a bit of both, Rachuk added calmly. This is what practice is for, and we have not had enough lately. There was a collective groan from the guards, likely having heard that line many times before. They had played their part well too. All the extra time spent on said practice while the Huntresses were busy putting food on the table had indeed shown. We're going to be doing more of this then? When? In between deparking logs and doing laundry? Barathon had questioned, speaking everyone's mind. If necessary, the cats had replied unfazed, looking to Jackie, who was indeed quite worn out too. Her heavy armour didn't do much for endurance when flying, but at least she had not needed to keep up with the other Huntresses today. For starters, we need to make better use of our latest asset. Heh, yeah, Jackie replied sheepishly, with a forced smile on her face, shrinking a little. I'll try not to get in the way next time. Of course, though some sparring practice would not go amiss either, whenever you do not feel the need to act as Tom's personal bodyguard. Tom pulled her in a little closer, a hand patting her on the mithril armoured back. I think I could survive for a little bit at least. Jackie didn't exactly look sold on the idea, but she didn't say anything to counter it either, likely resigned to her fate. Seth knew she quite enjoyed sparring, after all, at least when she was winning. The burly woman had been the only problem child for the guards formation today, but that was hardly surprising. She had never trained with the guards in the air, and she had little training fighting like they did at all. The large, heavy-set woman had rather managed to mess up Twitch's day, though, after the demolition expert had failed to notice her diving down towards him in the middle of a big melee. Normally when practicing, you would pull up to avoid collision, so the defending flyer could dive down freely to get away. Jackie had indeed pulled up, believing the small guy had seen her. He had not. The resulting collision, as he beat upwards to altitude, had apparently knocked him out cold. Jackie had reported barely feeling anything aside from her fingers aching, and a bit of a headache as the armour drew from her to soften the blow. The enchantments may even have saved the man's life, alongside the fact that he had been relieved of any explosive components prior to going airborne. There had been some debate on how long he had been out for, though. It was certainly quite convenient that he woke up just after Jackie had finished carrying him back to the keep. Everyone had taken the chance to get something to drink, and Tom had, as always, come through for them, in the shape of candy. All the Huntresses had eagerly scarfed down the sweet treat. Sapphire had barely even taken the time to savour it, as they climbed back up to continue the exercises. It did wonders, for a short while, but then it all fell apart. It had been humiliating as they were forced to retreat and admit they couldn't fight on. Victoria and Jordan had of course worked out what had happened. They didn't say anything, aside from advising that they bring enough sweets for the whole fight, if they felt like doing it for real. Either way, that is a future concern. I think this is going to be all for today, Dakota sighed, finally standing up straight after having been hunched over the table for the whole conversation. Get some rest. Cheers to that, Saf said with a sigh of relief, the sentiment soon echoed by most of the people around the table.
Inquisitor Harvick, what a pleasant surprise. To what do we owe the pleasure?
The deep, booming voice of Lord Tika called out. His tone was warm and welcoming, much like his halls. Everywhere Tom glanced, there were dragonettes, winter coats flung open to let the heat of the fires in. Some, more set on staying within the walls, wore clothes no thicker than what Tom knew the dragonettes of the keep to wear. With every step taken, a moment within, he could feel his body move more easily and his mind clear, which only raised his anxiety. He could feel his heart pounding. Just getting here had been near fatal, or at least felt like it, and what was to come might be no easier. Thank you, sir. Our visit is nothing unusual, I can assure you. We are simply doing the rounds, Harvick replied, as the Lord got up from his seat, which looked more like a throne. Elevated, with gilding upon the wood wherever it could be seen, and covered in grand furs, which Tom had no idea what might be. Jelena glanced about the room at the many trophies lining the walls. Some looked wolf-like, or perhaps bear. Others were clearly draconic in nature, but they lacked horns. And two were far too small to be anything but a child by dragon standards. Surely they must be something else. Place of pride given to 3 dragon skulls hanging behind the Lord's seat. The centre one must surely be as large as Arch. It was flanked by smaller ones, and they all had different horns and spines protruding from the bone.
Naturally, I take it, Chaika is hungry as ever. Shall we slaughter something for him, perhaps?
I think it best we leave his dinner for the morn. He had a hearty breakfast, Harvick lied. Or was it true? Jelena couldn't even remember. Besides, he will need it, I believe. We depart come morning, weather permitting, of course.
Spares us a good ox,
the Lord replied in good humour, though the Inquisitor's demeanour did not match it. He was cold and calculating. He was working, and the Lord likely knew so.
But a decent meal for you and your people is the least we can do.
Quite so, quite so. But first I have a young one I must test. Jelena, do please put your talents to use. Tom felt the woman stiffen before she took a step forward, almost mechanically looking to the Lord. She gave him a nod, eyes never leaving his. She stared him down, watching every twitch on his face. Confusion at first, but then a flicker of worry, soon replaced by his warm, welcoming facade.
Oh, I see. What a delight. I take it you want me to do my damnedest to keep our secrets from her?
No, I would not recommend that. Not unless I am to start instructing one of your sons in his duties, the Inquisitor replied with a touch of a snicker. The Lord took it well, like a good joke. He laughed in reply, and even slapped his thighs as he sat back down upon his throne.
Well then, you best not upset my wife. She will be watching from up above.
I make no such promises, Jelena replied, stepping up, eyes starting to dart side to side, heart racing. There were less than half a dozen of them here. The rest were still with Chaika, in the middle of a fortress where they should feel safe, but they were vastly outnumbered if it came to it. The Lord waited patiently, as she made her way up the steps to the raised platform upon which his throne sat, his attention shifting between her and the Inquisitor behind her. Harvick had not moved, nor did any of the others, save for Glaz. She remained to Jelena's left, but a step behind her. "This will be quite uncomfortable, Lord Tika," the young cadet clarified, as she sat across his lap. He seemed surprised by the act. She knew she was a fine-looking woman. Even a touch of distraction made her job all the easier. "Let your mind wander. Yes, look away. Very good." She placed her hands on the sides of his skull, fingers pressed into the leathery skin. She closed her eyes and concentrated. She concentrated on that which lay beyond the grasp of her fingers. Tendrils of magic poking and prodding at another mind. A shiver ran down her spine. It felt good. Tika did not resist her. He welcomed her with memories, sweet delicious memories, happy times. His childhood running around playing with kites before he could fly, playing games in the snow, only to quickly run back inside before his tail froze off. Stealing food from the pantry with some mischievous friends. It was all very idyllic. An impossibility for this part of the world. "Very impressive. You have done this before. I did not come here for a puppet show, Lord Tika," Jelena commanded. He could hear her, and what he was showing was of little interest. The Lord changed tack, bringing forth memories of fighting against the biting cold, the howling wind, numb fingers and toes. Terrifying beasts that had someone's heart pumping, though Tom knew not if it was his or hers. The memories were picked through and one stood out, for all the wrong reasons. When probed, the Lord resisted. He dared to resist her, after letting her in the door. This warranted further investigation. He writhed under her as she pushed. She pried the memory open against his will, and he felt him shake and twist. "Do not resist, I will know all." He grew still, limp almost, his mind but a whisper in response. "Of course." There was defeat and sadness in his tone. Tom could feel Jelena grow excited. She might have found something. With a rush, as if going weightless, Tom found himself immersed in the memory of a dragonette he had never even met. On a frozen sheet of ice, the wind howling around them. It was grey, dim and stormy. The icy wind bit at his snout, even covered as it was. He could make out sleds with strange four-legged creatures hauling. Their grey muddled coat matched his own. Their fur was long and silky, and looked to be a double coat. He had seen it at the fortress too, but seconds ago. They were the size of Shetland ponies, perhaps, four to a sled. Faces long and angular, without any sign of ears. One turned to look back at him, his eyes black and beady. There were 4 of them in total, much like the Vargolfs he had been so acquainted with before. He wanted to stare, but could not, the Lord's gaze instead turning to his comrades. In front of him, another sled could be made out, behind him a third. Everyone was stopped. Everyone was quiet as could be. Then he turned to face the unknown, shrouded by dim light and a flurry of snow. He could feel the warmth coming from within his thick suit. Either rocks or water bottles, he assumed. They could not be far from shelter. He raised a spear which looked a touch odd. It had rope tied to it, and a weird second stick actually held it. "What is so special about this? What are you hiding?" Jelena questioned, receiving no response, as through the stormy winds a rumbling was heard. A deep, guttural rumble. Then, from beyond the snow, came flying through the air a massive, 6-legged, tailless creature. Its fur was long, white and shaggy. Huge horns swept down by the sides of its neck, turning to face forward, below the chin. "Pharynx!" Tika shouted out, as he threw his spear and hit its mark. But he was spared. The sled in front of him was the target. The massive multi-ton beast came down upon it with a shattering of wood, and a quick scream cut short but a moment later. More spears were flung, ropes being let out, as the creature carried on its bounding run, flinging itself into the night once more. A dragonette lodged between its teeth. "Jinka!" someone called out. The 3 other dragonettes with the forward sleigh setting off running after the beast. Tom felt the certainty of steel descend over his motions. He leapt atop his sled, drawing a saber and severing the lines binding the dogs to the sled. "Hold on tight!" he called out as he crouched low, arms grabbing hold of the wooden frame. He watched the rope uncoil before going taut. It was secured to the heavy sled, and with a yank, they set off into the darkness. Faster and faster they went into the flurry of snow as the beast made its getaway. More spears were flung and a crossbow loosed against it. "Tire it out! Let the poison work!" As soon as he made his call, the massive creature turned side on, coming to a skidding stop, the sled sliding helplessly towards it. "Scatter!" the Lord called, jumping from the sleigh, as the Pherenix pounced once more, hurling itself at Tika's sled. The Lord staggered back, landing upon his back and watching as the dragonette steering from the rear was snatched up in a single bite. The scream cut painfully short, with a crunch of bones. "Tatraya!" the Lord screamed, a pained, blood-curdling scream, hand held high in front of him as he froze in place. The hulking creature turned to look at the source of the noise, a lifeless body of a woman hanging from its mouth. It remained staring for but a moment before another spear hit its mark. This one exploded upon impact into a flash of fire and heat. The creature startled back from the flash, its fur singed and smouldering, before it charged the remaining sled, reducing it to kindling. It took a moment to gulp down its prey before bounding into the storm once more, a lone dragonette being dragged screaming after it, tied to one of the spears. "Tatraya!" Tom felt the pain, the horror, the pure, unrelenting, crushing loss. He did not know who that woman might have been, but he knew who she was to Tika. "You hunted a Pherenix. That is a grave offense, Lord Tika." The judging voice of Jelena rang out through the memory, as Tom felt the ice cold of the snow, wind, and despair overtake him. "I trust you had a reason." "It killed my eldest son. It hunted dragonettes right up against our keep. It could not be allowed to continue," the Lord replied quietly, calmly, solemnly. "Please, it was the right thing to do." "No, though I believe the punishment fitting of the crime. Besides, you failed to fell the beast, did you not?" "No. It succumbed to the poison. It sits mounted above you right now." And with a rush in his stomach, like the sensation of falling, he returned to the warm, pleasant hall, the sensation of loss and utter despair remaining within him. Though it hardly seemed to faze Jelena. She looked up to the massive dragon skull mounted to the wall in surprise. It was no dragon skull at all. Behind her she heard a rumbling laugh, followed by a lone, slow clapping. "Very good. Well done, Jelena. You will do quite nicely indeed. Thank you, Lord Tika. As always, you provide a great service." The Lord did not answer, instead simply glaring at the jovial Inquisitor Harvick. "Inquisitor?" Jelena questioned, clearly confused as to what was going on. "Relax, young one. That trophy is our little secret. Has been for some time. You will now keep it too. Well done. Not everyone managed to pick out his little secret. Least of all so swiftly. And without hesitation, might I add. This was a test? I do not believe in the training master of Citadel. He is too soft. Come on. I believe there will be a feast soon. We have planning to do." "So, you look tired," Seth commented, as Jackie stepped into the workshop. The woman hadn't been there for breakfast, so something was definitely up. Saf's job for the day was to help Fengi in the drill, as the work site had dried out enough that they were going to try and have a drill rebuild the foundations. To add to the day's labour, through some miracle, Glira had taken the pudding the day before yesterday, agreeing to fetch some logs for them. That, of course, meant they needed to get the saw working, which looked like it may be easier said than done. Saf suspected she was perhaps still under the impression that hard work would impress Tom into giving what she overtly wanted. Saf was crossing her fingers that might make her work the saw once she made it back. She probably wouldn't stand doing manual labour around a drill, because there was no way in even the deepest crevice of hell that Black Dragon wouldn't rub Glira's snout in it. Saf didn't care though. They still got to brag about having gotten a Royal Guard dragon to fetch wood for them. Fengi thought it came down to said dragon not wanting to end up on the bad side of the Inquisition, which was certainly also a possibility, even if Glira rarely had a problem with ending up on people's bad side. But whatever worked. I am tired. Tom had a shit night again, Jackie responded, for all the world looking like she hadn't gotten more than a half night's sleep. Not again, Lancaster complained, looking up from her book, which she had annoyingly placed on the work table Saf was trying to use to organise the brackets she had been told to fetch. The mage had been pestering Saf ever since breakfast, hoping she could get Fengi to change her mind on barring them from experimenting with a drill. Saf was not one for stabbing her friends in the back, though. She understood what Fengi was trying to do. That, and she also believed a drill would mess up sooner or later, so all parties could get what they wanted. Jackie's position was far more interesting, and important. How bad? Saf questioned, hoping that the news would at least not be catastrophic. Don't know, Jackie let out, exasperated. He muttered in his sleep. He tried to throw something and then the shouting began. Something about, Detrier? He won't say who that was. He's, super depressed about it. Then why are you down here? Go stay with him, Weperna questioned, rightfully confused. To ask a favour. Lynn, would you mind? Jackalope questioned, turning to the mage. Mind what? You need me to help with something? I do not think I can make the symptoms any less prevalent. We have already tried that. No, not that. He wants to know about a big dragon like Snow Monster. Would you mind? I haven't heard of something like that before. Maybe find him something else to read too? Something that can take his mind off this one? Oh, of course. I can bring this, the mage declared, triumphantly holding up the book of Draconic Sorcery. It contains some speculation on the origins of dragons. Maybe he is talking about, Pherenix. Oh yeah, I think he says something like that. Yeah, very good. Just something other than that, too. Oh, who am I kidding? Yeah, just take that one. He won't want to hear anything else. He wants to work out what he saw, for sure. It's rare, but thank fuck for Jackie, Saf went to herself, as Lancaster started packing up her things. She wanted to snap at the mage for continuing to pester her about Fengi. Whip, I know I'm being an arse, but could you, keep working on the thing? Jackie continued, looking at the farm woman who had been grinding away on an axe head in the corner. They would need them sharp for the work to come, after all, so nothing strange there. Don't worry about it, Jackie, of course. Just remember to get the last few measurements, okay? The farmer replied, to Saf's surprise. What thing? Jackie looked a little hesitant, glancing between Saf and Lancaster before sighing. Okay, don't tell anyone, but I'm getting some clothes made for Tom. He needs something nice, something that's from here. Even if the t-shirts are quite nice. I still don't get why you haven't grabbed one of those yet. I can't imagine he would mind, Weperna replied, shaking her head gently as she started to pedal on the grind wheel once more. Oh yeah, I'm so doing that, the only half-awake Jackie replied, though it did seem to wake her up a little. So that's what you have been cooking up. I was wondering what all that leather would turn into in the end. Yeah, I wanted to do most of it myself, but, well, I'm not that great at sewing and, well, everything. Won't tell a soul, promise. What are you making for him? Shirt, pants, coat. Maybe something to wrap around his neck. He hasn't got much of a neck, though. He is going to love the coat. We got some nice fox fur for that one after your last go. Waperna joined in, her voice kind and caring. Yeah, but I feel like wolf or something would have been better. But we haven't seen any this year. Like, at all. Fox is very soft. I don't think he needs something as warm as wolf. You're just doing trimmings, right? Saf questioned, really hoping the answer was yes. A patchwork of foxes would not look very good at all. Of course, Waperna replied merrily, before Jackie got a word out. It will mostly be leather. I was thinking perhaps with some sort of fur lining, if we could scrape it together. Deer or boar isn't much good, after all. But for now, plain leather. Just something for every day, you know, Jackie interrupted, clearly wanting to say a word too. His stuff won't last forever, amazing as it is. Might also make him look a little less ridiculous if we get any new guests in the future. That would be nice, yeah. Even if it was quite fun to do up his hair. I'm sure he'll love it much more than he did the hair, the farm woman reassured her. The lining bolt is pretty much gone now, too. Maybe he needs another trimming then, Seth sniggered. But I'm sure he'll love the clothes. She wholeheartedly believed that fact. In fact, she was quite certain Jackie could give Tom a shiny rock and he would love it. Tailored clothes? Not even a question in her mind. Oh, also, don't forget the dragon skull. Surely that has to be about done by now. Oh yeah, thanks, Jackie replied, gesturing for Lynn Costa to follow her. Come on, Lynn. I made no promises about not falling asleep. And I'm the one cuddling him. You were like, storyteller. Like a puma when we were little. Okie dokie, the mage responded, unfazed, following the slow-moving Jackie out of the workshop, leaving Saf and Waperna staring at each other. So, think I can help you instead of having to hammer in nails all day? I think I will be fine, Waperna replied with a knowing smile on her face, as she held out the axe. Axe is sharp, though. If you hurry, you might be done in time to get to see what I've been working on. It's turning out great. Hang on, weren't you supposed to be the one doing the joinery? I don't know how to do that. No, Corninger is. You're just helping him. Ah, fuck.